The lake was calm that morning, and the air smelled fresh after the night rain. The small wooden cabin stood quietly near the shore, surrounded by tall pine trees. It was an old cabin, built years ago by a craftsman who loved simple design. The walls were sturdy, the windows framed the water view, and the porch stretched out toward the lake. Inside, Thomas sat at the table with a steaming mug of coffee. He had come to the cabin for peace. But today was not just about peace. Across the table sat someone important. The man was dressed neatly, with calm eyes and a strong voice. His name was Robert, and he was the state attorney general. Robert had chosen this cabin for a private discussion. He trusted Thomas, an old friend, and knew this remote place would be free from unwanted ears. The two men leaned closer, their voices low. "We have to be careful," Robert said, tapping his finger on the wooden table. "Not everyone wants the truth to come out. What we discuss here must stay between us until the time is right." Thomas nodded. He understood the weight of secrecy. He had invited Robert here because the town was facing unfair rules and hidden deals. People were angry, but they needed help from someone powerful. Robert had agreed to listen, and that gave. Thomas' hope died as they spoke. The sound of birds outside filled the silence. It seemed peaceful, but danger was not far away. The Neighborhood Homeowners Association, known as the HOA, had been causing trouble for months. They were strict, loud, and always ready to pry into other people's lives. At the center of it was a woman everyone called Karen. Karen believed she had the right to control everything near the lake. She walked around with a clipboard, wrote notes about neighbors, and complained about the smallest things. If a lawn was not cut short enough, she complained. If a boat was tied the wrong way, she complained. And if someone dared to do something without asking her permission, she stormed over. That morning, Karen had noticed movement at Thomas's cabin. She had not been told about any guests. She felt she had the right to know. Her curiosity grew into suspicion. She convinced herself something was wrong. She muttered to herself, "He's probably breaking rules again. I'll handle this." Without waiting, she marched down the narrow path toward the cabin. Her shoes crunched on the gravel, and her eyes were sharp with determination. She did not knock politely. Instead, she swung the cabin door wide open, pushing it against the wall with a loud bang. Thomas and Robert froze. The quiet of the room broke instantly. Coffee rippled in the mugs. Karen stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "I knew it," she declared. "Something strange is happening here, and I will not allow it. This cabin is part of our community, and I have every right to inspect what goes on." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. She had not expected anyone important inside. She only thought Thomas was hiding something simple. Maybe a guest who parked wrong or a project without approval. But her eyes widened when she noticed Robert. His calm gaze met hers, steady and unshaken. "Excuse me," Robert said politely but firmly. "Who are you? And why are you entering without permission?" Karen's confidence wavered for a moment. She had not prepared for this. She straightened her back and said, "I am the head of our HOA. I make sure rules are followed. This is my responsibility." Thomas stood slowly. His face was calm, but his voice carried weight. "Karen, you cannot just burst in. This is private property. You crossed the line." Karen ignored him, her focus on Robert. She tried to size him up, but something about his suit and his steady presence made her uneasy. "And who are you?" she asked with suspicion. Robert set his mug down carefully, then folded his hands on the table. "I'm Robert Lane, the state attorney general." The words hung in the air. Karen's mouth fell slightly open. For the first time, her clipboard slipped a little in her grip. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Thomas did not smile, though he felt the moment was almost humorous. Karen, who thought she controlled everything, had walked straight into a meeting far beyond her reach. I see," Karen stammered, trying to recover. "Well, even so, I still have the right to check what happens in this cabin. Rules must be respected." Robert raised one eyebrow. "Do you believe you are above the law, madam? Because breaking into a private home without consent is against the law. even if you are with an association. Karen's face turned red. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, for once. Her usual quick words failed her. She had not expected to be challenged like this. Thomas stepped forward, his tone firm but not angry. Karen, you need to leave now. This is no place for your interruptions. What happens here is not your concern. Karen took a step back, but she still tried to hold her ground. You cannot hide things from me. The community has a right to know. Robert's calm voice carried authority. The community has a right to fairness and justice. But that is not achieved through barging into homes. It is achieved through proper channels. I suggest you remember that. Karen's eyes darted between the two men. She had come expecting to scold, to control, to win another argument. Instead, she had walked into a room where her power meant nothing. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed out, muttering under her breath. The door slammed shut behind her. Silence returned to the cabin, but the mood was different now. Thomas looked at Robert, shaking his head. She won't let this go easily. She'll talk, she'll twist the story, and soon the whole neighborhood will be buzzing. Robert leaned back in his chair, thoughtful, then let her talk. Sometimes noise only exposes the truth faster. We have nothing to hide, Thomas. What we are planning here is right, and the law is on our side. Thomas nodded. Though his mind still felt heavy, he knew Karen's interference was not the end. It was only the beginning. Outside, the lake rippled under the soft wind. Birds sang. Again. But inside the cabin, both men knew the calm would not last. The storm had just begun. The air outside the cabin carried the sound of Karen's hurried footsteps. She stormed back up the path, clutching her clipboard tightly as if it gave her power. Her mind spun with thoughts. She could not believe she had walked into the cabin and found the state attorney general inside. To her, this was not just unusual, it was suspicious. She convinced herself she had uncovered something bigger than anyone else could see. By the time Karen returned to her car near the road, she was already planning her next move. She muttered, "The community must know. They'll thank me later." She climbed into the driver's seat and drove off quickly, gravel spraying behind her tires. Inside the cabin, Thomas sat down again, his hands rubbing across his forehead. "This is trouble," he said quietly. "She will tell everyone she meets by nightfall. The whole neighborhood will know you were here." Robert remained calm. His eyes followed the steam rising from his coffee mug. "Let her talk," he repeated. "Rumors are weak when the truth is strong. What matters is that we stay focused on the real issue." Thomas looked across the table. "Do you think she might report this to someone higher? To the council or the local paper?" Robert leaned forward, his voice steady. "If she does, it may work in our favor. The more attention, the more chance to reveal what has been hidden. Sometimes noise draws out shadows." Thomas understood, but worry still sat heavy on his chest. He had lived near the lake for years and had seen how Karen twisted stories. She always painted herself as the hero, the one saving the community. He feared she would turn the neighborhood against him before the truth could be spoken. The afternoon. Sun moved slowly across the sky. A breeze rattled the branches outside. The two men spoke quietly about land use, secret deals, and how the HOA had been pressuring homeowners unfairly. Robert listened carefully, making notes in a small leather book he carried. His calm presence gave Thomas strength, but deep inside, Thomas knew Karen was not the type to walk away defeated. Meanwhile, in the neighborhood across the lake, Karen had already gathered a small group on her porch. 3 neighbors sat on folding chairs, sipping iced drinks, while Karen stood before them like a speaker on stage. "You will not believe what I discovered," she began, her voice filled with dramatic energy. "This morning, I went down to Thomas's cabin. Do you know who I found inside? The state attorney general himself." Gasps rose from the group. They looked at each other, confused. One neighbor, an older man named Paul, raised an eyebrow. "The attorney general? What business would he have there?" Karen leaned forward, lowering her voice to a whisper even though no one else was nearby. "That's what I'm asking. Why would such a powerful man come secretly to a small cabin by the lake? Something is going on. I suspect Thomas is hiding more than we think." The neighbors shifted uneasily. Another, a woman named Clara, frowned. "Karen, maybe it's private. Maybe it has nothing to do with us." Karen shook her head fiercely. "Nothing escapes us. This community has the right to know. If powerful men are visiting cabins in secret, it could mean danger or corruption or worse. We cannot sit quietly." Her words spread like sparks. By evening, whispers traveled from porch to porch, across phone calls, and even through quick conversations at the small market near the highway. "Did you hear about Thomas's cabin?" Someone would ask. Karen saw the Attorney General there. What could it mean? Back at the cabin, Thomas and Robert stepped outside as the sun lowered. Near the horizon, the lake glowed orange, and gentle waves lapped against the shore. Thomas pointed toward the cluster of homes across the water. "They'll all be talking by now," he said. Robert nodded. "Let them. The more attention, the more pressure. The truth is patient. It waits for its time." Still, Thomas could not shake his unease. He knew Karen. She would not rest until she stirred the entire community. That night, as darkness settled, the first signs of trouble came. Headlights flickered along the dirt road near the cabin. A pair of cars slowed down, stopping just short of the driveway. From inside, Thomas and Robert could see shadows of people pointing toward the cabin, whispering among themselves. "They're already watching us," Thomas said. Pulling the curtain slightly. Robert stood calmly near the window. "Curiosity is harmless. It is fear we must prepare for. When people fear what they do not understand, they act without reason." The car stayed for a few minutes before driving away. But Thomas knew this was only the beginning. By tomorrow, half the neighborhood might come knocking. The next morning arrived with a heavy mist over the lake. Thomas brewed fresh coffee while Robert reviewed his notes. Before they could sit, the sound of a knock came at the door. It was not loud and forceful like Karen's, but quick and nervous. Thomas opened the door to find Clara, the neighbor Karen had spoken to. She looked uneasy, her hands clutching the straps of her bag. "Thomas," she said softly, "I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted to ask, is it true? Was the Attorney General here yesterday?" Thomas hesitated, glancing back at Robert. Robert gave a small nod, signaling honesty. "Yes." Thomas answered, "He is here, and we are discussing important matters." Clara's eyes widened slightly. "Important matters?" Karen has been saying all kinds of things. She says something suspicious is happening. She says the community should not trust you. Thomas sighed. "Clara, I have lived here many years. Have I ever brought harm to this place? You know me." Clara's expression softened. "Yes, I know you. That's why I came here directly, instead of listening only to Karen. But Thomas, people are restless. They are already talking about meetings and votes. Karen is pushing hard." Robert stepped forward then, his presence calm but commanding. "Miss, I assure you, nothing unlawful or harmful is happening here. We are working for fairness. But rumors are strong, and they grow quickly. I ask you not to let fear guide you." Clara looked between them. She nodded slowly. "I will try to calm others. But Karen is loud, and people follow her voice." When she left, silence filled the cabin again. Thomas turned to Robert. "She's right. Karen will not stop. She will rally everyone she can. Soon this won't just be whispers. It will be a storm." Robert closed his notebook and placed it gently on the table. "Then we prepare for the storm. And when it comes, we will meet it with truth." Outside, the mist began to lift, but across the lake, more cars arrived at Karen's house. More neighbors gathered, drawn by her voice, her claims, and her confidence. The whispers were turning into an uproar. In the cabin, once a quiet retreat, was now the center of attention for the entire community. The sun had barely risen when Karen set out her folding chairs. She placed them neatly in rows across her porch, as if preparing for a council session. Her clipboard rested firmly under her arm, and her sharp eyes scanned the street for neighbors. She had already called several the night before, insisting that everyone must gather. By 8 o'clock, people began to arrive. Cars parked along the narrow street, neighbors carried mugs of coffee, some still rubbing the sleep from their eyes. They did not know exactly what to expect, but Karen's voice had a way of pulling them and Karen stood proudly at the top step, addressing the crowd as if she were mayor. Friends, thank you for coming. I called you here because something unusual is happening at Thomas's cabin. Murmurs spread through the group. Everyone knew Karen had a habit of exaggerating, but curiosity drew them closer. I went there myself yesterday, Karen continued. And do you know who I found inside? The state attorney general. That's right, the most powerful legal officer in this state. And he was meeting secretly with Thomas. Whispers rose quickly. Some shook their heads. Others leaned in with interest. A man named Henry, who owned the house closest to the lake, raised his hand. Karen, maybe it was just a friendly visit. Why are you making it sound like a conspiracy? Karen's eyes flashed. Because powerful people don't travel to cabins in secret unless something is wrong. What if Thomas is hiding something? What if they are planning to take our land, or raise fees, or change the rules without our knowledge? The crowd grew. Restless, a woman named Ruth frowned. Do you have proof of that? Karen tapped her clipboard. Her voice sharp. I don't need proof yet. I saw it with my own eyes. And I know how these things work. Once decisions are made behind closed doors, it is too late for us. That is why we must act now. Some nodded, others looked unsure. But Karen pressed on, her voice rising. I am calling for a special community meeting tonight. We will vote on how to handle this. If Thomas and his guests think they can hide plans from us, they are mistaken. This community will stand together. The crowd clapped weakly, more out of habit than excitement. But the idea of a meeting spread quickly. By the time the neighbors left Karen's porch, most agreed they would attend. The seed of unrest had been planted. Meanwhile, at the cabin, Thomas was unaware of the gathering. He and Robert sat quietly, reviewing papers. The Attorney General had brought documents showing how the HOA had been misusing funds and enforcing rules beyond their legal power. It was the reason he had come in secret, to see the situation for himself. Before taking official action, Thomas rubbed his chin as he looked at the papers. This proves everything we suspected. They've been charging fees for things that don't exist. They've been threatening fines they cannot enforce. Robert nodded. Yes? And once this is brought forward properly, the law will correct it. But timing is important. We must ensure that people understand before fear takes over. As if on cue, Clara returned that afternoon. Her face was tense, and she carried news that made Thomas's heart sink. They're holding a meeting tonight. She said, Karen is telling everyone you're hiding things. She says the Attorney General's visit is proof something bad is happening. People are nervous. Thomas, some are angry. Thomas stood quickly. Already, she wasted no time. Robert, remain steady. Where will this meeting be? At her house, Clara answered. She invited the entire community. She says they'll vote on what to do. Thomas sighed heavily, pacing the room. She'll twist the story until no one can see the truth. They'll turn against us before we even speak. Robert placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Then we will speak. We will go to this meeting. The truth does not fear questions. Thomas hesitated. Karen won't like that. She does not need to like it, Robert replied calmly. But the people deserve to hear more than her voice. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the lake in gold, Karen's porch filled again. Nearly every neighbor was there, sitting or standing, buzzing with questions. Karen stood tall at the front, clipboard in hand, ready to lead. Thank you all for coming. She began, her voice loud and proud. As you know, yesterday I discovered something unusual at Thomas's cabin. The Attorney General himself was inside. Now I ask you, why would such a man meet in secret with one of us? What is being planned without our knowledge? Shouts came from the crowd. Yes, why? What are they hiding? Karen raised her hands for silence. This is about transparency. If Thomas has nothing to hide, then why all the secrecy? Why not tell us openly what is happening? The crowd murmured agreement. It seemed Karen was winning them. But then, to everyone's surprise, Thomas and Robert stepped onto the porch. Gasps rippled through the group. All eyes turned toward them. Karen stiffened, her grip on the clipboard tightening. Thomas's voice carried firm but respectful. "We came because we hear you are worried, and you deserve the truth," Karen snapped back. "The truth is that you are meeting in secret. The truth is that none of us were told." Robert stepped forward then, his calm presence commanding attention. "Madam, allow me to speak. I'm Robert Lane, the State Attorney General. Yes, I came to the cabin, not for secrecy, but for fairness. What we are reviewing is the way your HOA has been managing this community. There are signs of misuse, signs of unfair rules, signs of pressure placed on good people here." The porch fell into silence. Even Karen did not speak for a moment. Robert continued, "I did not come to hide. I came to see with my own eyes before taking action. I came to understand the people who live here, not to harm them. My work is for justice. And that means for you, the community." Whispers spread again, but this time softer, less certain. Karen quickly raised her voice, trying to regain control. "Do not be fooled. He speaks well, but why come here in secret if not to hide something?" Robert looked directly at her. "Sometimes the truth requires quiet at the beginning, before it is ready to stand against noise. But now you know, and you will know more, in time, through the proper process of law." The neighbors shifted uneasily. Some nodded at his words. Others still looked to Karen for guidance. The battle for trust had begun, and it was clear it would not end tonight. But one thing was certain: the calm life by the lake was gone. Something larger was unfolding, and every person there could feel it in the air. The night after the porch meeting felt heavy across the lake. Some neighbors went home unsettled, replaying Robert's calm words in their minds. Others carried Karen's warnings like sparks ready to spread into flames. The community, once united by the shared beauty of the water and the tall pines, was beginning to divide. Inside her house, Karen paced the floor. She had not expected Robert to show up at her gathering. His words had caught her off guard, and for a moment, she felt small before the crowd. But Karen was not one to give up easily. She tapped her clipboard with a pen, whispering to herself, "If he thinks he can charm them, he's mistaken. People trust me. I've led them for years. I will not let this slip away." Across the lake, in the quiet of the cabin, Thomas and Robert sat by the fire. The glow lit their faces as they spoke in low voices. "They don't know who to trust," Thomas said. "Half of them listen to you, but the other half still believe Karen. She has been their voice for so long, even when she twists the truth." Robert leaned forward, steady as always. "Division is not weakness if handled carefully. It is the start of choice. They will decide soon which voice leads them forward, fear or fairness." Thomas nodded slowly, though his heart felt heavy. He loved the lake and the community. He did not want neighbors to turn against neighbors. But he also knew the truth about the HOA had to come out, no matter how messy the path. The following morning, Karen made her next move. She went door to door, speaking to families in their yards, at their porches, even catching some before they drove to work. She spoke with passion, her hands waving as she warned of secret plans and powerful outsiders taking control. Some nodded and believed her. Others listened politely but grew doubtful. Still, Karen's voice carried far, and by the end of the day, she had convinced a strong group that Thomas and Robert were a danger to their way of life. At the same time, Clara and a few others who trusted Thomas began speaking quietly to their friends. They told how Robert had answered questions calmly, how he had promised fairness, not harm. "Think about it," Clara said. "Why would the Attorney General himself come here unless something was truly wrong? He came to help us, not to take from us." The neighborhood began to split. At the small market near the highway, the groups formed in whispers, one siding with Karen, the other siding with Robert. Even children overheard parents arguing at dinner tables. The peaceful lake community had never seen such division. By the third day, tension spilled into open conflict. At the dock, Henry and Paul, once fishing partners, stood face to face with raised voices. "You're blind if you believe Karen," Henry said sharply. "She twists everything to keep control. You know she fines people for leaving a canoe tied too long." Paul crossed his arms. "At least she cares about order." Do you trust some politician more than your own neighbor? Thomas brought him here in secret. That's not how trust works. Their argument grew so loud that others stopped to watch. The air buzzed with unease. Word of these fights reached Thomas and Robert at the cabin. Thomas's shoulders slumped. As he listened, it's starting already. They're turning on each other. Robert closed his notebook and looked firmly at him. That is why we must bring truth into the open, not only through words but through action. When people see proof, their doubts will fade. Later that evening, Clara visited the cabin again. She carried a paper Karen had passed around. Look. At this, she said, handing it to Thomas. It was a flyer, bold with black ink, titled, "Protect Our Community, Stop Outside Influence," underneath. Karen had written sharp words warning that the Attorney General wanted to take control of property rights and strip the HOA of its power to protect families. She urged everyone to attend another meeting that weekend. Thomas's face tightened as he read. "She's painting you as the enemy," he told Robert. Robert studied the flyer calmly. The louder her lies, the easier they will break once the truth is shown. Do not fear her noise. Still, Thomas felt the storm building. That weekend came quickly. By dusk, Karen's porch was crowded again. More people than before filled the lawn and driveway. She had set up lights, making it look like a grand event. She stood proudly in front of them, waving her flyer. "My friends," she called, her voice strong. "We are under threat. A man of power sits across the lake, pretending to be our friend. But he does not live here. He does not share our struggles. He is here to take from us, not to give. And Thomas, who should be our neighbor, has chosen to side with him against us." Cheers rose from her supporters. But scattered among the crowd were those who remained silent, their eyes thoughtful, still, and certain. Clara stood near the back, her arms crossed, refusing to clap. Then, before Karen could continue, headlights appeared down the road. A black car pulled into the driveway, stopping smoothly. Robert stepped out, tall and calm, followed by Thomas. The crowd hushed. Some whispered, others folded their arms. Karen stiffened at the sight of them. Robert walked forward, his voice steady but carrying across the crowd. "I will not hide. If you believe I am here to harm you, then hear my words tonight. If you believe I am here to help, then test my words." Against the truth, Karen quickly raised her voice. "You see, he comes here to speak as if he rules us. This is our home, not his courtroom." Robert faced the crowd, ignoring her interruption. "You deserve to know why I am here. Documents show that your HOA has been charging fees without legal basis. Rules have been enforced beyond what the law allows. Homeowners have been threatened with actions that are not valid. These are facts, not rumors. That is why I came. To protect you from injustice." Gasps spread. Some shook their heads in disbelief, but others leaned forward, listening closely. Karen snapped. "Lies. He only wants to weaken our community. Don't let him fool you." Robert held up a folder. "These are the records. If you want proof, you shall see it. The law is not against you. It is for you. But it cannot help if fear blinds you." The crowd shifted uneasily. People began whispering to one another. Some supporters of Karen looked uncertain now, while others still glared at Robert with suspicion. Karen's voice wavered slightly, but she forced it strong. "He twists the truth. Do not trust him." But her words no longer held the same power. A line had been drawn across the community. Some now leaned toward Robert. Others clung to Karen. The lake shore was divided, and the battle for trust had truly begun. The morning after the lakefront meeting, tension hung thick in the air. Thomas stood on the porch of his cabin, watching the sunlight glint off the water. He knew the community was now divided, with whispers spreading faster than waves across the lake. Some neighbors trusted Robert and Thomas. Others clung tightly to Karen's warnings. Inside the cabin, Robert sorted through the papers he had brought, carefully arranging notes on every unfair action by the HOA. His calm voice broke the silence. "We must act wisely. Karen is loud, but she cannot stop the law. Still, she may try to force conflict. Be prepared." Thomas rubbed his temples. "I fear she will go further. She has already gathered support, and I know she is capable of bold moves." The whole neighborhood might turn against us if she decides to attack publicly. Robert nodded. Truth is strong, Thomas, but strategy matters. We cannot simply react. We must plan. Meanwhile, Karen was already in motion. She had decided on a bold plan to strengthen her control. That morning, she called several supporters and instructed them to post flyers across the neighborhood. The flyers were simple, bold letters claiming, "Beware the Attorney General's visit. Protect our homes now." She included warnings about Thomas, painting him as someone who sided with outside power against the community. By noon, neighbors who had not attended previous gatherings saw the flyers, their curiosity growing into concern. Mothers and fathers whispered to each other about the danger in their own streets. Children overheard neighbors speaking in hushed voices, and the community buzzed with tension. Karen did not stop there. She organized a public demonstration at the small park. By the lake, families gathered, holding homemade signs warning of outside interference. She gave speeches to anyone willing to listen, repeating phrases she knew would stir emotion: secrecy, danger, outside control. Her energy was high and her presence commanding. People who had never questioned her words began to follow her instructions. Without thinking, across the lake, Thomas watched from the cabin window. He shook his head. "She's escalating faster than I imagined," he said. Robert placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let her escalate. We will respond calmly. Chaos is temporary when truth is present." That evening, Clara returned once again, looking troubled. "Thomas," she said quietly, "some neighbors are planning to confront you directly. They think you are hiding something. That Robert is here to take control. Karen is stirring fear. We need to act." Thomas nodded. "I know. We must speak openly to the community. We cannot wait any longer." Robert stood and gathered his papers. "Tonight, then, we present the facts clearly. We show evidence. Fear cannot stand against proof." As the sun dipped low, neighbors began to gather near the cabin. Karen was there too, her presence like a shadow over the lawn. She stood at the edge of the group, clipboard in hand, prepared to challenge anything Thomas or Robert might say. Thomas stepped onto the porch first, followed by Robert. His voice was calm but firm. "Neighbors, I know there are concerns. Many of you have heard rumors. Some of you may have seen Karen's warnings. Tonight, we speak the truth." Karen's lips pressed together, her expression tight. She stepped forward. "The truth is that outsiders are interfering in our community. That man, Robert Lane, is here to take control, and Thomas is helping him. How can we trust them?" Robert raised a hand calmly. "Madam, I'm not here to take control. I'm here to ensure fairness. I came because some actions of the HOA have been illegal. Fees were charged without proper authority. Threats were made beyond the rules. That is why I am here. That is why I review the records personally. Not to harm anyone, but to protect everyone." A neighbor shouted, "Can we see proof?" Robert nodded and held up the folder. "You will. All records are here, showing exactly how decisions were made and where the law was not followed. We want transparency, not secrecy. We want fairness, not fear." Karen snapped, "These are lies. He manipulates papers to make it look like Thomas is innocent. He wants to confuse you. Do not trust him." But Thomas stepped forward, calm and steady. "Karen, listen. I have lived here many years. I care about this lake, our streets, and our neighbors. Robert is here to protect us, not to hurt us. You have been spreading fear, but the facts speak for themselves." Some neighbors began moving closer to the porch, curiosity overcoming fear. Others looked toward Karen, unsure what to believe. Her bold moves had gathered attention. But now the spotlight had shifted. Robert opened the folder and began to show. "Clear records. See these accounts. These are legal documents showing where HOA rules overstepped. Here are letters sent threatening fines that cannot be enforced. Here are details of fees collected beyond authority. This is reality, not rumor." Neighbors leaned in, reading over the papers carefully. Murmurs filled the air, but now they were not whispers of fear. They were questions, doubts, and a desire to understand. Karen's confidence faltered slightly. She tried to regain control. speaking loudly. Do not be fooled. They will tell you what you want to hear. But the power outside this lake is dangerous. Trust me, neighbors. I have always protected you. One by one, some of her supporters began to step back, their eyes on the papers, their hands folding the flyers they had brought. The truth was visible, undeniable, and growing stronger than Karen's words. Clara, standing beside Thomas, smiled. Quietly, they're starting to see it, she whispered. Karen's face hardened. She realized that her bold move had backfired. Instead of scaring neighbors into obedience, she had given Thomas and Robert a platform to show facts, to speak openly. Her attempt to control the narrative had weakened. By the end of the night, the lawn was quiet. Neighbors lingered, some approaching Thomas and Robert to ask questions. Karen retreated to the edge of the property, her clipboard clutched tightly, realizing she had lost the momentum she had built over weeks. Thomas and Robert returned inside the cabin. Thomas exhaled slowly. It worked. They listened. Some may still follow her, but many are starting to see the truth. Robert nodded. Truth is patient, Thomas. Karen made her move boldly, but facts are stronger than fear. The battle is not over, but we have gained ground. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. The wind whispered through the pines. The neighborhood was divided still, but the seeds of fairness and clarity had taken root. Karen's bold move had been impressive, but the truth had weathered it, and now the community had a chance to see beyond fear and rumor, guided by honesty and justice. The next morning, the lake reflected a pale, misty light. Hiding the tension that had grown overnight, Thomas stood on the porch, watching the surface of the water ripple softly. He knew tonight could decide the fate of the neighborhood. Karen had not given up, and some neighbors still followed her, ready to challenge everything Thomas and Robert stood for. Inside the cabin, Robert organized papers and records once again. He had prepared detailed notes and evidence, anticipating questions and doubts. Tonight, Thomas, he said quietly, we must show that truth cannot be ignored. Some may resist it, but the evidence will speak for itself. Fear is loud, but facts are steady. Thomas nodded. He had hoped the confrontation could be avoided, but Karen's persistence left no choice. The community needed clarity, and the only way to achieve it was through open discussion. Backed by proof. By late afternoon, Karen's presence could already be felt. She walked along the street, clipboard in hand, calling neighbors she knew would follow her. She repeated the story of secrecy, danger, and outside interference. Some nodded and joined her. Others remained uncertain, hesitating at the fence or on their porches, unsure who to trust. Meanwhile, Thomas and Robert prepared at the cabin. They cleared the porch of chairs and arranged them for an open discussion. Flyers explaining the HOA issues and legal records were laid neatly on a table. Robert had also prepared a list of questions to address concerns directly, without creating fear. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the first group of neighbors arrived. Clara greeted them and quietly explained the process. We want everyone to hear the facts, she said. Please take your seats and review these documents. Ask questions. Do not let fear guide your judgment. By early evening, the cabin porch was filled with people. Some still whispered to each other, glancing nervously toward Karen, who had arrived with a small group of her supporters. She stood at the edge of the gathering, clipboard in hand, scanning faces with determination. Thomas stepped forward first. Neighbors, he began, his voice calm but strong. Thank you for coming. I know many of you have heard rumors and warnings. Tonight, we show you the facts, and you will decide what to believe. This is your community, and your voice matters. Karen immediately spoke up. Do not be fooled. They want you to think everything is fine, but secrets hide danger. The Attorney General is not here to protect us. He is here to change our rules. Without our consent, Robert raised a hand. Madam, please allow the community to see the records first. Let us present evidence before judgment. The law protects fairness, not fear. Karen frowned, but for the first time, she did not interrupt. Further, she realized that standing against calm facts was harder than shouting over rumors. Thomas opened a folder. Here are records showing fees charged improperly, letters threatening fines that had no legal basis, and actions beyond the authority of the HOA. We are not hiding anything. We are showing truth for everyone to see. Neighbors leaned in. Some whispered questions. Others examined papers silently. Murmurs spread across the porch as people began to compare what they had heard with what they now saw. One man, Henry, raised a hand. I've lived here for years. I never knew these. Letters were sent. I thought the rules were normal. Clara nodded. Many of us didn't. That is why Robert came, to clarify, to protect us all. The records show the facts. Karen's face tightened. She tried to speak, but Thomas raised a hand politely. Please, everyone, hear the evidence first. Fear can mislead. Let us present the truth before opinions are formed, Robert continued, pointing to documents. These records demonstrate exactly where the HOA acted outside its authority. You have the right to see them, ask questions, and decide for yourselves. Our goal is fairness for every homeowner, not control or punishment. Neighbors shifted, some whispering to each other. Clara walked through the crowd, answering questions gently, helping people understand the documents. Slowly, the room began to quiet, curiosity replacing fear. Karen finally spoke. They may show papers, but can you trust them? They have influence. They want to take power away from your community. Robert looked directly at her. Madam, influence does not create falsehoods. Facts do. You may believe what you want, but the evidence here is clear. The law is on the side of fairness. No one can twist these records. One by one, neighbors began asking questions. What about the fees we paid last year? Can they really enforce those fines? What do we do now? Robert and Thomas answered each question patiently, showing proofs and explaining the legal limits of the HOA. Karen's supporters grew quieter. Some whispered to each other, unsure how to respond to the steady calm of Robert and the clear evidence Thomas provided. She tried to regain control, but the tide was turning. By the end of the evening, the crowd had shifted. Many neighbors stepped forward to thank Thomas and Robert for clarity. They had started to see Karen's claims as exaggeration, no longer absolute truth. A small group still supported her, but it was clear her influence had weakened. Karen stepped back, watching us. Neighbors approached the porch to review documents and ask questions. Her confident energy faltered. She realized that no amount of shouting could overcome transparency. Facts had a quiet power she had underestimated. Thomas exhaled. It's working. They see the truth now. The division is still there, but clarity is spreading. Robert nodded. Truth is patient. Karen made her bold move, but it revealed more than she intended. Now, people have a choice to follow fear or reason. Outside, the lake reflected the rising moonlight. The wind whispered through the pines, soft and steady. For the first time in weeks, Thomas felt hope. The neighborhood was still divided, but it had begun the journey toward understanding and fairness. And somewhere in the shadows, Karen realized that even her boldest moves could not stop what was right from coming to light. The next morning, the lake was quiet. Mist hovered above the water, soft and still, as if the world itself was taking a breath. Thomas walked along the porch, reviewing the events of the past week in his mind. The confrontation with Karen and the community had been intense, but he felt a sense of relief. Facts had begun to replace fear. Inside the cabin, Robert gathered the records carefully, placing each folder in order. Tonight, we will finalize everything with the community, he said. We will answer remaining questions and make clear how fairness will be restored. The law is on their side, and they need to see it. Thomas nodded. Karen will still try to oppose us. Some neighbors follow her, but I think most are ready to listen. By late afternoon, neighbors began arriving once more, this time at Thomas's invitation. Clara had helped spread the word that they would have a calm and open discussion with proof and answers for all concerns. Some people looked nervous, unsure whether Karen had spread new warnings overnight. Others approached quietly, curious to finally understand the truth. Karen, meanwhile, had decided on her final attempt. She stood near the street, clipboard in hand. Addressing her supporters, "Do not believe everything you hear," she said. "They want to trick you into ignoring rules that protect your homes. I will not let that happen. Stay alert." But her energy had lost some power. Many of the neighbors who had been uncertain the night before chose to approach Thomas's cabin instead. Even some of Karen's previous supporters paused, hesitant. To act out by evening, the porch and lawn were full. Neighbors sat on folding chairs. Others leaned against the railing, and a small group gathered near the lake's edge. Thomas stepped forward, calm and steady. "Neighbors," he began, "thank you for coming. I know the past week has been confusing. There have been warnings, rumors, and concerns. Tonight, we speak only about facts so you can make decisions for yourselves." Karen stepped forward immediately. "Do not trust them," she said sharply. "They want to weaken your community and take control. Listen to me." Robert held up his hand politely. "Madam, we will allow the community to see evidence first. Facts speak louder than words, and you will all have the chance to read them. Ask questions and understand the situation clearly." Karen's frown deepened, but she stepped back, realizing that open presentation might expose weaknesses in her argument. Thomas opened the folders he had prepared. "Here are records of every action taken by the HOA in recent years. These letters, fees, and rules are shown clearly. You can see which actions were legal and which were beyond authority. You can read for yourselves and ask questions." Neighbors leaned in, reading the documents carefully. Murmurs filled the air. Questions, comments, and observations. Clara walked among them, helping people understand the details. Slowly, the fear that Karen had spread began to dissolve. A man named Henry, who had been one of Karen's strongest supporters, raised his hand. "I see now that some of the warnings were exaggerated," he said. "These records show what actually happened. I understand better now." Karen's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Her energy could not overcome the clear facts laid out. Before everyone, Robert spoke next. "The law exists to protect homeowners, not to punish. These records prove what has been done correctly and where action is needed. We are here to ensure fairness for all of you, not to take control." One by one, neighbors approached Thomas and Robert with questions. "What do we do about fees that were charged unfairly? How can we prevent mistakes in the future? Will this HOA be held accountable?" Each question was answered patiently, with clarity and calmness, leaving little room for fear or confusion. Karen's supporters grew smaller in number as more neighbors recognized the truth. Some left quietly, muttering under their breath. Others remained, still loyal but hesitant to speak. The weight of the evidence made even the most loyal reconsider. By nightfall, the cabin was calm. Most neighbors had departed, having received answers to their questions and having seen the records for themselves. Those who remained lingered quietly, reflecting on the week's events. Thomas exhaled, feeling the tension lift. "It is done," he said softly. "The truth is clear, and people can decide with knowledge instead of fear." Robert nodded. Karen made her moves boldly, but facts cannot be stopped by noise. The community now has the opportunity to rebuild trust and fairness. That is the greatest victory. Outside, the lake mirrored the moonlight, soft ripples spreading across the surface. The quiet night felt like a promise of peace returning to the neighborhood. Karen, standing near her car, realized the battle had ended. Her bold attempts to control the narrative had failed. Even her strongest supporters had seen the truth. She clutched her clipboard one last time before lowering it. The community had chosen reason over fear, and her influence had waned. The next morning, life began to return to normal. Neighbors greeted each other politely, sharing small smiles. Some discussed minor details about the HOA calmly, while others went about their daily routines. The lake reflected the sunrise, peaceful and clear. Thomas and Robert stood on the porch together, watching the neighborhood come alive with small signs of everyday life. Children played near the edge of the lake. Neighbors waved to one another across streets, and the sense of community slowly returned. Thomas turned to Robert. "Thank you. Without your help, I do not know how this would have ended." Karen's voice is loud, and her persistence is strong. You helped show the truth calmly and clearly. Robert smiled softly. Truth does not need to shout, Thomas. It stands patiently. You acted with honesty and courage, and that gave people the chance to see what really matters. Clara joined them, smiling gently. It feels good to see the neighborhood calm again. The last week has been hard, but now people understand. They can make decisions without fear. Thomas nodded. Yes, and I hope this will remind everyone that fairness and honesty matter more than loud voices or quick judgments. The sun rose higher, warming the lake and the cabins along the shore. Birds called softly from the trees, and the gentle sound of water lapping against the docks filled the air. The storm of fear and division had passed. Karen drove away quietly, leaving the neighborhood behind. Her bold moves had failed, but the lesson remained. The community valued truth over rumor, fairness over fear, and calm action over noise. Thomas and Robert remained on the porch, watching the lake together. For the first time in days, there was peace. The neighborhood could now begin again, with clarity, trust, and understanding guiding every decision. And at that moment, it was clear to everyone who had witnessed the events, honesty and patience had triumphed over fear, and the lake would once again be a place of calm and community.